Hi, today I will be presenting my summaries for chapter 14, 15, and 16. So first, let's start with the chapter 14. So it's concerning the managing communication. So first we need to know what is communication in order to know more about managing communication. So communication is the process of transmitting information from one person or place to another. So the basic perception process is a process by which individuals attempt to organize, interpret, and retain information from their environment. Is the key obstacle to communication. And then we have the perceptual filters. So the personality, psychology, or experience-based differences that influence them to ignore or pay attention to particular stimuli. So there's the basic perception where the attention, the organization, interpretation, and retention of the communication is how it's processed in the mind of people. It's different for everybody. So first, we got perception problem. We got selective perception and closure. So selective perception is tendency to notice and accept objects and information consistent with our values, beliefs, and expectations, while ignoring or screening out inconsistent information that are not we perceive not important. After foreclosure, is the tendency to fill in the gaps where information is missing. That is, to assume what we don't know is consistent with what we already know. After here, we got the perception of the others. So the attribution theory, so it's basically about having a basic need to understand and explaining the causes of other people's behavior. There's the internal causes and the external causes. After the kind of communication, there's formal, informal, coaching and conflict, and nonverbal communication. All of this kind of communication are important in the business communication and are often used and must be chosen the perfect one for the different messages. And here we have the communication process that comes from the book. This image I thought that represented very well the process. So that's it. After the formal communication process, where there's the high level of organization, low level of organization, and organizational communication that is horizontal and then we have one-on-one communication, so it's coaching, mentoring, and counseling, which are very valuable tools to have in a company to retain employees. Also, mentoring concentrate on career development and on knowledge transfer. And after for counseling, it's communication about non-job related issues that may be affecting workplace performance. That can affect also the communication in the workplace. After the nonverbal communication, or the communication that doesn't involve any words, so it's non-intentional. Receiver often consider nonverbal communication more accurate and representative of what the sender are thinking and feeling when the words than the word that they use. And after we know how to communicate, whether it's verbal or non-verbal, we need to choose the right communication method, oral or written. Both methods used to deliver message that needs to be communicated from one to another person. Also, listening is very important in communication in a business, since it's how you process or perceive, how you process the message and how you listen to it and understand it. So first, there's active listening and empathetic listening. So active listening means assuming that half the responsibility for successful communication by actively giving the speaker non-judgmental feedback that shows that you have accurately heard what she or he is saying. And there's the empathetic listening, which is understanding the speaker perspective and personal frame of reference and giving feedback that conveys that understanding to the speaker. After, we have the strategies to be a better active listener, which is something that should be communicated and teach to people in any businesses, since it's a way to help you understand better the message that the other person is giving back to you. So asking questions, providing feedback, don't talk, but only listen, and talk after the person that is giving the communication is done. Need to pay attention and keep an open mind. Also, for giving a feedback, there's different type of feedback. There's the destructive feedback and the constructive. Basically, the constructive feedback is the best to use in a company because it's intended to be used helpful, corrective, and or encouraging, whereas the destructive feedback is about disapproving without any intention of being helpful and almost always causes a negative or defensive reaction from the recipient. And also there's specific feedback and problem-oriented feedback. So specific feedbacks are focused on the particular acts or incident that are clearly under the control of an employee. So like an employee that comes late at work. And the problem-oriented feedback are problems or incidents associated with the poor performance rather than on the worker or the worker's personality. After, for chapter 15, that is concerning control. So control is a regular process of establishing standards to achieve organizational goals, comparing actual performance to that standard, and taking corrective action when necessary. So the controlling process, it's establishing standard, comparison of standard, corrective action, dynamics, cybernetic process, and setting control methods, and control loss. But before establishing standard, we need to know what is the standard. So a standard is a basis of comparison for measuring the extent to which organization performance is satisfactory and or unsatisfactory. And then we compare performance to standard. So the quality of the comparison depends on the measurement and information system a company uses to keep track of performance. So better the system, easier it is for the company to track their progress and identify the problems. After, we need to correct the action. So we identify the performance deviation, analyze the deviation, develop and implement corrective programs. Here's the cybernetic control process that starts with establishing standard, measuring performance compared to standard, identifying deviation, create and deploy corrective programs. After, the feedback, concurrent, and feed-forward control. So feedback control is a mechanism for gathering information about performance deficiency after they occurred. Also, concurrent control addresses the problem inherent in feedback control by gathering information about performance deficiencies as they occur. And finally, we have feed-forward control, which is a mechanism for gathering information about performance deficiency before they occur. Control loss is a situation in which behavior and work procedure do not conform to standard, so the cost is higher than the return on investment. Here we have the control methods that can be happening in a business. So there's the bureaucratic control, objective control, normative control, conservative control, self-control, or self-management. All of these can be used in different ways and apply on different person and different situations. To have control in a business, you need to have more than one thing that you control, since if you only have one, the other dimension are likely to suffer. And if you try to control too many things, then the employees and manager will be confused about what's really important. So we need to find a balance that comes between only one and too many. So about 3 or 4 things to control at a time. Also, balanced scorecard encourages managers to look beyond traditional financial measure to 4 different perspectives on company performance. So there's the customer perspective, internal perspective, innovating and learning perspective, and the financial perspective. And these are the advantage of and disadvantage of different measure of quality. So the excellence, the value, the conformance to specification. And these are ways to minimize waste in a business. So waste prevention and reduction, waste reuse and recycling, waste treatment, and waste disposal. Now let's move on to the last chapter, chapter 16, which is concerning managing information in a global world. So here we have the Moore's Law and the importance of information. So information is useful data that can influence people's choice and behavior. So the first mover advantage, there's different type of advantage about concerning information. The first mover advantage, sustaining a competitive advantage. Also, the characteristic and cost of useful information are accuracy. So the information must be correct. The completeness. So incomplete or missing information makes it difficult to recognize problem and identify potential solution. The information also needs to be relevant, so it must pertain to the problem you're facing, and they must be timely, so they must be available whenever they are needed to define a problem or to begin to identify possible solution. Communication costs associated with useful information, so there's the storage, retrieval, communication, acquisition, and processing. After, when capturing data, there's the electronic era, where there's the barcodes, RFID tags, electronic scanners, optical characters recognition. And after we process the information, we transform raw data into meaningful information that can be applied to business decision making. So companies can use data mining, so the process of discovering a pattern and relationship in large amount of data, where we apply complex algorithms such as a neural network, rule of induction, and decision trees. After, the information are stored into data warehouse, where there are a huge amount of data that have been prepared for data mining analysis by being clean of error and redundancy. After, the sequence of pattern, when 2 or more data elements occur together in a significant pattern, but one of the elements precedes the other. There's also the predictive pattern, that is a pattern that helps identify database elements that are different. And the association of affinity patterns, when 2 or more database elements occur together in a significant way. When predicting information, it's a very important step when having access to many information. So we need to ensure that the data are reliable and consistently retrievable in a usable format for authorized user, but not anyone else. So there's a authentication data, SSL, for the authorization, two-factor authentication, biometrics, and virus. Also, firewalls can be used, VPN, and EIS. So we need to access and share the information. So the information and knowledge internal, that is internal. So internal, we have the executive information system, corporate control, intranet. And for the external, we have EDI, external